My brothers and sisters, in a world full of confusion, deception, and political games, the believer must never lose sight of one truth: nothing happens without the knowledge of Allah. When we hear shocking headlines, when we see nations turning against each other, and when we hear whispers like Israel is now targeting Pakistan, we must pause not to panic, but to reflect. Pakistan's refusal to recognize Israel and its consistent stance on Palestine creates strategic discomfort in global politics, especially for those who wish to silence any moral or ideological resistance from within the Muslim world. While many countries have normalized relations with Israel or remained silent in the face of its aggression, Pakistan has maintained a position, even if symbolic, that unsettles those who promote normalization at the expense of justice. This isn't just about politics, it's about principle. When a nation refuses to bow, refuses to sell its voice, and continues to stand, even silently, for the rights of the oppressed, it becomes a problem for those who seek complete control over the narrative. And in today's world, where narratives are more powerful than bullets, even silence rooted in principle becomes threatening. Pakistan may not be launching military campaigns or directly engaging with Israel, but its refusal to recognize the Zionist state carries weight. It sends a message to the world that not all can be bought, not all can be pressured, and not all will abandon the cause of Palestine for trade deals or international approval. This resistance, however diplomatic or passive it may seem, breaks the flow of normalization that powerful countries want to spread across the Muslim world. When one major Muslim nation stands apart, it creates doubt, it raises questions, it gives hope to the voiceless. And in the eyes of those who want full control, hope is dangerous. This is why Pakistan is being watched. It is not just its military or nuclear assets that concern others. It is the stubborn moral stance that makes it unpredictable. While other nations weigh their decisions based on economics or Western pressure, Pakistan still carries the legacy of a vision that was tied to Islamic identity. Though many within may have drifted, and though internal weaknesses are many, the roots of that vision still live on, and that makes the country stand out. The refusal to accept Israel is not just a diplomatic policy. It is a line in the sand that many in the modern world are trying to erase. And those who refuse to erase it become targets not always by war, but by isolation, pressure, destabilization, and propaganda. The idea is simple. If you won't agree with us, we will paint you as the problem. And slowly, bit by bit, those who speak for Palestine, those who expose injustice, those who stand for their values, they are labeled as threats. Not because they hold weapons, but because they hold convictions. In the eyes of those who dominate global narratives, conviction is dangerous. A country like Pakistan, which has not bowed to the normalization agenda, becomes a thorn, especially when that country also has nuclear strength, military capacity, and a large Muslim population. When such a country refuses to play by the script, efforts are made to portray it as unstable, aggressive, radical, or problematic. Slowly pressure builds, internal instability is fanned, economic crises are worsened, strategic partnerships are threatened. The goal is to weaken the backbone of the nation, so that it either collapses under its own weight, or comes to the negotiating table in desperation, ready to sign what it once refused. This is how modern warfare works. It's not just tanks and bombs anymore. It's isolation, manipulation, psychological tactics, and economic pressure. And behind all of this is the discomfort that one Muslim nation still refuses to submit to an agenda that others have embraced. That refusal, even if passive, sends a signal to others. That resistance is possible, that faith can still be a guiding principle in state policy, and that not every nation will trade dignity for convenience. In a world where principles are rare, even silent resistance becomes a threat. And when that resistance is backed by military potential and ideological identity, it becomes a focal point of concern. Pakistan's nuclear capability makes it a unique power among Muslim nations, triggering quiet concern across many parts of the world, especially in regions where unchecked dominance is preferred. In a global order where power is often monopolized by a select few, the idea of a Muslim majority country possessing nuclear weapons is not just uncomfortable, it is, for some, unacceptable. Unlike other Muslim countries that may have strong economies or powerful alliances, Pakistan stands alone with a credible and operational nuclear deterrent. And what makes it more challenging for its opponents is that this capability exists independently, without being under the control or guardianship of Western or Zionist interests. This autonomy is what truly disturbs those who want every power in the world to be aligned with their agenda. When a nation has nuclear weapons, it sends a message: we are not weak and we cannot be ignored. But when that nation also has ideological convictions, deep-rooted Islamic identity, and a population that still holds love for the Ummah, it becomes more than a security concern. It becomes a strategic challenge. The existence of Pakistan's nuclear arsenal changes the balance of power in the region. It prevents aggressive maneuvers, it creates hesitation in the minds of those planning war, and it offers a shield not just for Pakistan itself, but potentially, symbolically, for the Muslim world. This is why whispers and speculations rise. This is why the narrative begins to shift toward portraying Pakistan as unstable or unpredictable. Because when those in power cannot control your weapons, they will try to control your image. The world we live in today is not just shaped by weapons, but by perception. And the perception being built around Pakistan, especially by its critics, is one of danger, disorder, and dysfunction. Not because Pakistan has used its nuclear power irresponsibly, but because it exists as a Muslim power that refuses to hand over its strategic assets to the approval of outsiders. There is a fear that if Pakistan remains strong, if its institutions stabilize, if its people unify, then it will become a voice for the voiceless, a defense for the defenseless, and a barrier against unchecked oppression. This potential is what invites concern, because the systems of global control thrive when Muslim nations are weak, divided, and dependent. When a Muslim country has both the will and the weapon, it disrupts the script. This is why efforts may be made not through direct confrontation, but through indirect pressure to weaken the foundations of Pakistan's defense. There may be attempts to cause political instability, economic collapse, or civil unrest. The goal is not to fight on the battlefield, but to make the country collapse from within, to make the people lose trust in their own systems, to create doubt about their own institutions. Because if the people no longer believe in their own strength, they won't resist when that strength is taken away. Pakistan's nuclear strength, in reality, is not just a tool of defense. It is a symbol, a reminder that the Ummah is not powerless, that there is still one nation, despite its flaws, that holds something which others fear. And that is why Israel, along with others who support its expansion and dominance, may quietly view Pakistan as a future obstacle, not because Pakistan has ever declared war, but because its very existence with such strength is a silent resistance to a world order where Muslims are expected to be weak, silent, and submissive. This fear of potential is more dangerous than actual action. Even if Pakistan never uses its weapons, the fact that it has them, the fact that it refuses to be bullied, and the fact that its people still speak of Palestine, of justice, and of Islam, this combination creates anxiety for those who want no resistance, no voice, and no reminder of truth. Israel's tactics are shifting from direct warfare to digital, ideological, and economic disruption. And this modern strategy is far more subtle, far more dangerous, and far more effective in breaking nations from within rather than defeating them from the outside. Traditional warfare is loud, visible, and invites global attention and condemnation. Bombs, tanks, and missiles may destroy buildings, but they often unite people in resistance. On the other hand, digital manipulation, psychological operations, misinformation, and economic sabotage work silently, weakening a nation's foundations while the people remain unaware of who the real enemy is. This is the era of silent invasions, where minds are captured before cities, and where a nation's identity is dismantled long before its defense lines are breached. Israel and those who support its expansionist ideology understand the power of this modern warfare. Instead of launching attacks, they launch narratives. Instead of sending soldiers, they send ideologies through media, through films, through news cycles, through economic deals masked as partnerships. And when a country like Pakistan resists recognition, refuses to normalize, and holds on to its Islamic identity, that resistance becomes a target not for warplanes but for narratives. A carefully designed campaign begins to show Pakistan as backward, unstable, radical, or untrustworthy. The people begin to internalize the image crafted by the outside world. The youth begin to question their own values. The elite begin to mimic the oppressors. Slowly, without firing a bullet, the soul of a nation is attacked. This is where Israel's modern strategy thrives, by influencing opinion, by creating confusion, by dividing communities, by planting seeds of mistrust between institutions and citizens, by pushing the youth away from their religion, away from their history, away from their purpose. The war is no longer about land. It's about the soul of a generation, and if that soul can be captured, there is no need to conquer territory. Because a people who forget who they are, who adopt the mindset of their enemies, and who doubt the strength of their own faith, will willingly hand over their future without a fight. Economic pressure is another tool in this strategy. A nation that is financially weak can be forced into decisions it once proudly resisted. Loans, debts, trade dependencies, and aid packages often come with silent conditions. Recognize this. Normalize that. Sign this. Ignore that. A nation desperate to survive economically may slowly compromise morally. And this is how enemies operate today, not with threats, but with offers, not with war, but with deals, not with occupation, but with influence. The goal is not to destroy the country with bombs, but to reshape it with policies, distractions, and incentives. So that when the people finally look back, they realize that while their soil remained untouched, their values, their unity, and their strength were stolen. This kind of warfare is difficult to detect, because it wears the mask of development, progress, and globalization. But behind that mask is a system designed to ensure that no Muslim nation ever stands tall, ever speaks truth, or ever becomes a genuine power that challenges the unjust. Pakistan is not just a country on a map. It is home to millions who still love the Deen, who still cry for the oppressed, who still feel pain for their brothers and sisters around the world. That spiritual connection, that emotional resilience, is exactly what modern enemies want to break. Because once that is gone, everything else falls easily. The strategy is clear. Keep the people entertained, divided, confused, and dependent. Break their connection with Allah, their confidence in their leaders, and their trust in one another. Inject constant fear, endless distractions, and false hopes, so that while the people are looking outward for threats, the real damage is being done inside their own hearts and minds. And once a nation is defeated internally, there is no need to conquer it externally. The real threat to Pakistan is internal decay, disunity, corruption, and weakening of Islamic values. And this threat is far more dangerous than any foreign conspiracy. History has shown time and time again that no nation is ever truly destroyed from the outside, unless it is already rotting from within. When the people of a country abandon justice, when the leaders seek power without accountability, and when society begins to forget the difference between halal and haram, between truth and falsehood, then even the most powerful armies cannot protect that nation from collapse. Pakistan is a nation blessed with countless resources, a strategic location, rich history, and people who still have love for Islam in their hearts. Yet despite all of this, the cracks within are growing deeper, and the danger does not lie in weapons pointed at its borders, but in what is happening within its own walls. Disunity is one of the greatest internal threats. When a people are divided along ethnic, sectarian, linguistic, or political lines, they become easy to manipulate and impossible to defend. The Ummah was once strong because it was united, despite its diversity. Today, in Pakistan, unity is treated as an ideal instead of a responsibility. People are ready to fight over flags, over political parties, over regions, but when it comes to standing together for justice, for the oppressed, for Deen, the voices become weak and scattered. Enemies do not need to divide us, we are already dividing ourselves, and a divided house cannot stand. Then there is the disease of corruption. It is not just limited to those in positions of power. Corruption has seeped into the everyday lives of people, from lying on a job application to cheating in business to bribing for convenience. When a nation's people begin to believe that wrong is normal, that cheating is smart, that deception is necessary, then they themselves destroy the moral foundation of the country. Leadership reflects the people. If the people are dishonest, selfish, and unjust, then the leaders who rise will carry those same traits. This cycle continues until the people forget what true leadership even looks like. And while we point fingers at the world for targeting us, we forget that we are targeting ourselves every day through our own actions. The weakening of Islamic values is perhaps the most alarming threat. As long as the people hold firmly to the Quran and the Sunnah, they are protected not just by principles, but by divine promise. When those values are pushed aside, when modesty becomes something to be mocked, when salah is missed without regret, when honesty is replaced by manipulation, and when Islamic identity becomes a burden instead of an honor, then the doors of barakah begin to close. A nation that forgets Allah will not find peace, no matter how many weapons it owns or how rich its cities become. Real strength comes from obedience, from sincerity, from fear of Allah, and from love of the Prophet, letter F, DFA. The internal decay is also seen in how people have become numb to injustice. When a poor man suffers, it barely causes a reaction. When someone is wrongfully imprisoned or oppressed, there are only a few voices that rise. As long as the injustice does not affect us personally, we remain silent. But a society that tolerates oppression, even in small amounts, eventually becomes a society that normalizes it. And when that happens, the society itself becomes an accomplice in its own destruction. Pakistan does not need to fear Israel or any other nation if it can heal its internal wounds. But if these wounds are left untreated, if the people continue to choose ego over unity, wealth over honesty, and comfort over truth, then the fall will not come from outside bombs, but from inside cracks. The danger is not just in external attacks, but in the loss of taqwa, the abandonment of amanah, and the betrayal of the trust that Allah has given. Divine protection is linked to collective obedience to Allah, not just military strength. And this reality has been repeated throughout history. Yet it is often forgotten when nations become arrogant or distracted by worldly power. It is easy to assume that safety and victory come from advanced technology, large armies, and strategic alliances. But Allah reminds us that true strength, true protection, and true honor come only through submission to Him. When the people of a nation turn to their Creator with sincerity, uphold justice among themselves, and fear none but Allah, then even the strongest enemies fail to harm them. But when a nation forgets its Lord, when it abandons the commandments that were sent for its own protection, then it loses the divine shield that guards it against its enemies, and all its worldly power becomes meaningless throughout the Quran. We find stories of powerful empires that collapsed not because they were outnumbered, but because they rebelled against the truth. Nations with mighty armies were defeated because they became arrogant, corrupt, and forgetful of their responsibilities. The same lesson applies today. If Pakistan wishes to remain protected, not just from physical threats, but also from internal destruction, it must return to obedience, to collective repentance, and to implementing the teachings of Islam in public and private life. It is not enough for individuals to be righteous in their homes while injustice, immorality, and corruption spread in the streets. The change must be collective, the effort must be sincere, and the return must be to Allah alone. Obedience to Allah is not limited to rituals. It includes every aspect of life: how we treat the poor, how we speak the truth, how we honor contracts, how we lead our families, and how we respond to oppression. When a nation collectively upholds these values, Allah's help descends upon them in ways no one can imagine. The angels fought alongside the believers in Badr, not because they had better swords, but because they had sincere hearts. The Muslims won when they were few because their faith was pure. But when they disobeyed, even at Uhud, they suffered loss despite having strength. These stories are not just history, they are guidance for today. In Pakistan, there is still love for Deen. The masjids are full in Ramadan, the hearts of the people soften at the sound of the Quran, and there is still immense charity given in secret. But the obedience must go deeper. It must move from the heart into the system. Justice must be upheld from the streets to the courts. Bribery must be rejected not just by those who give it, but by those who take it. Leaders must fear Allah more than they fear the media. And the public must hold themselves accountable before pointing fingers. This is the path to divine protection, not slogans, not flags, but actions rooted in taqwa and sincerity. When people disobey Allah openly, and injustice is done without consequence, and lies are spoken without shame, then even the strongest nations fall into chaos. The protection of Allah is not granted to those who mock His laws or selectively follow what benefits them. It is given to those who submit to Him in both ease and difficulty. When the Prophet entered Makkah with strength, he forgave, he showed mercy, and he remembered that victory comes only from Allah. That humility is what preserved the Ummah. But when nations become proud of their weapons, their titles, or their economy, and forget the one who gave them all of it, then they invite destruction upon themselves. If Pakistan wants to stand tall in a world that is increasingly hostile to Islam, it must plant its feet firmly in obedience to the Creator. This means not just preaching Islam, but living it in business, in education, in government, in media, and in daily interactions. When a people turn to Allah, He turns to them. When they protect His commands, He protects them. But if they abandon His guidance, they are left to the mercy of their enemies, and no amount of weapons or allies can save them. The promise of Allah is clear, and it has never failed. Those who hold firmly to Him are never truly defeated, even when the world rises against them. Media narratives and global propaganda aim to reshape Muslim identities and silence resistance. And this is done so subtly that many people do not even realize it is happening. In today's world, wars are not only fought on battlefields with weapons, they are fought in the minds of people through stories, headlines, movies, and social media. The global system understands that if it cannot defeat the Muslim Ummah by force, it can try to weaken it from within by changing how Muslims think, what they believe, and how they see themselves. If the people can be made to doubt their religion, their history, and their purpose, then they will no longer resist injustice. They will simply become silent observers of their own destruction. This is why Pakistan, being a country with a large Muslim population and a deep connection to Islamic values, becomes a key target for ideological warfare. The aim is not just to damage Pakistan's image internationally, but to shake the confidence of its own people. By constantly portraying the country as unstable, extremist, backward, or intolerant, a narrative is created that slowly influences even those who live within its borders. The youth begin to feel ashamed of their identity. The educated elite begin to distance themselves from Islamic values, thinking that progress means adopting foreign lifestyles and leaving behind religious principles. This shift in mindset is not accidental. It is a carefully crafted plan to separate the Muslim heart from its roots. Movies, music, news, and online platforms are used as tools to inject doubt, confusion, and false ideals. Young people are shown a version of success that is entirely materialistic, empty of any spiritual value. Modesty is mocked, prayer is ignored, and anything Islamic is portrayed as old-fashioned or extreme. Meanwhile, those who speak up for Palestine, those who call for justice, those who remind the world of truth, they are labeled as radicals, extremists, or threats to peace. The goal is to make Muslims afraid of their own identity, to turn resistance into silence, and to turn conviction into confusion. This type of warfare is far more dangerous than bombs and bullets, because it attacks the soul. It doesn't destroy buildings, it destroys beliefs. And once a generation is raised without pride in its deen, without love for the Prophet, letter FDFA, and without a sense of belonging to the Ummah, then that generation becomes easy to control. They no longer feel the pain of their brothers and sisters. They no longer feel the urge to speak the truth. They live in a world where comfort is more important than courage, and where popularity is more important than principle. Pakistan, in particular, is portrayed in the global media as a problem, not because of what it does, but because of what it represents. A country that still hasn't recognized Israel, a country that speaks for the rights of Muslims in Palestine, a country with nuclear capability and an Islamic foundation. This combination makes it a threat to the global agenda that seeks to normalize oppression and silence faith-based resistance. And so the plan is to reshape it, to make it more acceptable, more modern, more tolerant. Words that are often used not to encourage peace, but to encourage the abandonment of Islamic values. And while all of this is happening, many people do not even realize that they are being shaped by forces that do not care about their faith or their future. They scroll, they share, they repeat what they hear, not knowing that their minds are being slowly rewritten. The enemies of truth no longer need to silence people by force. They only need to keep them entertained, distracted, and disconnected from their roots. This is why it is so important for Muslims, especially in countries like Pakistan, to be awake, to be aware, to teach their children the truth before the world teaches them lies, to guard their hearts from the illusions of media, to protect their homes from the influence of falsehood, because once a heart is filled with confusion, it no longer recognizes the light when it appears. Media narratives and global propaganda aim to reshape Muslim identities and silence resistance. And this is done so subtly that many people do not even realize it is happening. In today's world, wars are not only fought on battlefields with weapons, they are fought in the minds of people through stories, headlines, movies, and social media. The global system understands that if it cannot defeat the Muslim Ummah by force, it can try to weaken it from within by changing how Muslims think, what they believe, and how they see themselves. If the people can be made to doubt their religion, their history, and their purpose, then they will no longer resist injustice. They will simply become silent observers of their own destruction. This is why Pakistan, being a country with a large Muslim population and a deep connection to Islamic values, becomes a key target for ideological warfare. The aim is not just to damage Pakistan's image internationally, but to shake the confidence of its own people. By constantly portraying the country as unstable, extremist, backward, or intolerant, a narrative is created that slowly influences even those who live within its borders. The youth begin to feel ashamed of their identity. The educated elite begin to distance themselves from Islamic values, thinking that progress means adopting foreign lifestyles and leaving behind religious principles. This shift in mindset is not accidental. It is a carefully crafted plan to separate the Muslim heart from its roots. Movies, music, news, and online platforms are used as tools to inject doubt, confusion, and false ideals. Young people are shown a version of success that is entirely materialistic, empty of any spiritual value. Modesty is mocked, prayer is ignored, and anything Islamic is portrayed as old-fashioned or extreme. Meanwhile, those who speak up for Palestine, those who call for justice, those who remind the world of truth, they are labeled as radicals, extremists, or threats to peace. The goal is to make Muslims afraid of their own identity, to turn resistance into silence, and to turn conviction into confusion. This type of warfare is far more dangerous than bombs and bullets, because it attacks the soul. It doesn't destroy buildings, it destroys beliefs. And once a generation is raised without pride in its deen, without love for the Prophet, letter FDFA, and without a sense of belonging to the Ummah, then that generation becomes easy to control. They no longer feel the pain of their brothers and sisters. They no longer feel the urge to speak the truth. They live in a world where comfort is more important than courage, and where popularity is more important than principle. Pakistan, in particular, is portrayed in the global media as a problem, not because of what it does, but because of what it represents. A country that still hasn't recognized Israel, a country that speaks for the rights of Muslims in Palestine, a country with nuclear capability and an Islamic foundation. This combination makes it a threat to the global agenda that seeks to normalize oppression and silence faith-based resistance. And so the plan is to reshape it, to make it more acceptable, more modern, more tolerant. Words that are often used not to encourage peace, but to encourage the abandonment of Islamic values. And while all of this is happening, many people do not even realize that they are being shaped by forces that do not care about their faith or their future. They scroll, they share, they repeat what they hear, not knowing that their minds are being slowly rewritten. The enemies of truth no longer need to silence people by force. They only need to keep them entertained, distracted, and disconnected from their roots. This is why it is so important for Muslims, especially in countries like Pakistan, to be awake, to be aware, to teach their children the truth before the world teaches them lies, to guard their hearts from the illusions of media, to protect their homes from the influence of falsehood, because once a heart is filled with confusion, it no longer recognizes the light when it appears.